The Exogorth were gigantic space slugs which inhabited asteroid fields. They'd usually anchor themselves securely within caves located inside asteroids, using long tendrils that not only held them in place, but also absorbed nutrients directly from the asteroid's material. There, they'd kinda just chill out while consuming their main source of sustenance: passive radiations. They were also known to gnaw on mineral-rich rock and metal from floating space debris as secondary food sources. Supposedly, they'd also eat silicon-rich animals like the Minox. Occasionally, a naturally occurring chemical response would trigger aggressive behavior, causing the space slug to attack or kill anything that happened to be nearby. However, most of the time, they were rather peaceful and would live for billions of years sometimes. Furthermore, they could grow to enormous sizes, reaching nearly 1 kilometer in length. At such massive scales, they were known to bite into large starships that wandered too close to their lairs, and in some cases, they could completely swallow spacecrafts. Some version of the Exogorth even grew big enough that they could attack and swallow an entire Star Destroyer, as could be seen when the ISD Bellicose rammed through an Exogorth when chasing a U-Wing. However, this did kill the Exogorth, as an ISD is just too big for its own well. Despite this, when they grew this large, the Minox they typically consumed could end up surviving inside the slug, turning into internal parasites rather than a meal, taking residence within the slug's cavernous digestive systems. The Minox also fed off radiations, but did like to attack starships to maul at the metal inside them. Some of these giant slugs even hosted entire ecosystems within their digestive systems, with multiple species living inside their bodies. For reproduction, the Exogorth actually did something called fission. Once a slug grew large enough, it would split into 2 smaller slugs, each continuing life on its own. Rather creepy, ain't it? They could also move from asteroid to asteroid if they deemed that necessary, crawling out from one asteroid hole and jumping off it to reach another asteroid they could bury themselves into. Its most famous appearance was obviously during The Empire Strikes Back, when Han Solo escaped the Empire in the Hoth asteroid field by flying into the mouth of an Exogorth. That Exogorth was actually dubbed Psi-O, and was considered a rather young Exogorth, despite being a billion years old. After the Millennium Falcon escaped it, it actually snapped at a few TIE fighters as well, forcing them to open fire on it. Luckily though, it merely retracted more into its cave and didn't take any damage. Live on, Psi-O. 2 billion year birthday is right around the corner, buddy. There's also a fun Easter egg in the 2015 Battlefront where you can see an Exogorth popping its head out in an asteroid field. I sense a disturbance in the Force. If you like Star Wars and gaming and want to be part of a friendly community that combines both things, check out Multiverse Gaming. MVG has been around since 2015 and has a popular Gary's Mod server where you can play as your favorite Star Wars characters and legions, such as the Jedi, 212th, 501st, and more, in a completely player-led experience. There are multiple intense battles every single day that immerse you as part of the Clone Wars era, as you travel to iconic locations from across the galaxy in your fight against the CIS, Death Watch, bounty hunters, and more. Imagine Battlefront, but on a bigger scale, with custom-developed gameplay content, regimental-specific trainings, rank progression from a new PvT all the way up to the commander of a legion such as Cody, and a fun day-to-day role-playing experience as a member of the Republic. There is something to enjoy for all Star Wars fans and gamers, while meeting new like-minded people. There's also an Arma 3 operations server with missions every Friday and Saturday. Join their Discord with over 1,400 others by clicking the link below or typing it into your browser, and check out their game server to start your journey. The Rancor was the sole reason that I wanted to make this list. It's the coolest looking creature ever, and certainly one of the most popular and well-known ones in the Star Wars fanbase. It comes in at around 5 to 10 meters in height and is a carnivorous creature. The Rancor walked mainly on its 2 stubby hind legs in a hulking manner, although they could use their arms to walk on 4 if necessary. Their arms had huge clawed fingers that they could use to grab onto prey or to fight against any potential threats. Its skin was very hard and durable, being easily able to repel any blaster shots against it. They were also very powerful and strong, easily able to crash through sand buildings and lift up speeder and such, and their jaws had several teeth that could easily crush bones. However, despite their fearsome looks, they were actually not inherently vicious, rather just defensive should they be attacked or feel intruded on. They actually were somewhat similar to elephants, although not as intelligent. They often moved in herds on Dathomir and were semi-sentient, with one alpha Rancor, which was the strongest of the herd, leading them. They did also mourn their family members when they died, which is something that elephants do quite frequently. However, they didn't seem to do any other intelligent activities, but rather just hunt for prey all day. They were native to the planet Dathomir. However, due to their popularity as fearsome pets, a lot of them found themselves scattered throughout the galaxy. Lehon, for example, had several Rancors running around, as well as Felucia, just to name a few. The Rancors were extremely strong, and due to that, the witches on Dathomir domesticated them in order to ride them into battle. This domestication led to a widespread taming of the Rancors on Dathomir, with most of them being part of each of the different Night Sisters clans. After the witches' example, several other Rancors across the galaxy were domesticated to a degree in order to ride them into battle or for them to serve as guardians of camps and fortresses. The Rancors would often develop caring and loving bonds with the riders that took care of them. The Rakata Infinite Empire were another prominent force that domesticated them and brought them to Lehon to protect the ancient temple. Even after the fall of the Infinite Empire, the leftover primitive Rakata still managed to tame the Rancors on Lehon for their uses. The Rancor in Jabba's palace was also tamed and taken care of by Malakili, who formed a deep bond with the Rancor and took care of him to the best of his abilities, even having plans to eventually save it from the captivity in Jabba's palace. Malakili loved the Rancor so much that in fact he contemplated suicide after Luke killed the Rancor, feeling like he lost all purpose in life without it. In The Force Unleashed, Shaak-Ti and Maurice Brood can also be seen riding a Rancor on Felucia before Starkiller comes in and kills the Rancors. Boba Fett in the Book of Boba Fett also tamed a Rancor in record time and used it to fight the Scorpionic droids. We can see there how strong and resilient a Rancor is, as it could take several blaster shots and still keep fighting, while also being able to smash through the Scorpionic droid shields. There were also several Rancor subspecies, such as the Jungle Rancor, which was created through Sith alchemy, and can be seen walking through Felucia in the Clone Wars TV series. Another was the Bull Rancor, which had huge horns on its head and was likely also corrupted by the dark side to some extent. There was also the Rage Rancor, which appeared in Star Wars Commander and could be deployed by the Empire and Rebels alike. Like, just look how cool this guy is attacking this Rebel base here. Absolutely tanking through the base, having this smash attack that does damage to the entire surface. Bring back Star Wars Commander. It's literally Clash of Clans in Star Wars. Why the hell don't we have this anymore? The Rancor Pit from LEGO is also one of the most sought-after sets on the secondary market, as it's very unlikely to be remade, as LEGO's kind of moved their design philosophy a bit, it seems. Of course, I own this set as well as this incredible-looking Rancor. Chances are, if they'd remake this set ever, it'll just be some shitty brick-built one or something. Anyway, the Rancor's friggin' awesome, and it's part of what makes Star Wars so great for me. The Sarlac was a gigantic plant-like creature that seemed reminiscent of a Venus flytrap somewhat, as it ate literally anything that would fall into its pit. However, it was actually still an animal, and even somewhat sentient. They reached sizes of up to 100 meters and lived for up to 50,000 years. What made them plant-like was that for reproduction, they'd use spores that would travel through space until they'd find another planet to land on. There, they'd implant themselves into the Earth and then grow another Sarlac to form the infamous pit. This pit was only their mouth, though, and was the only visible part of its body, as the rest was underground. The Sarlac remained mostly stationary, only showing its mouth and tentacles, which it could use to catch nearby prey and throw them into its mouth. The teeth were angled inwards and acted like a barbed wire, to prevent prey that had fallen in to climb out again. Also, for anyone confused like me, this weird thing that looks like the male reproductive organ is in fact not its mouth, but its tongue, which it used to help move the prey deeper into its mouth. The Sarlac's body lacked bones or any real frame, but it had powerful muscles and thick external roots lined with nerve endings embedded in its skin. These nerve-rich roots served multiple purposes. They absorbed nutrients from the surrounding ground and acted as vibration sensors, allowing the Sarlac to detect movement across the surface of the desert. Without eyes or ears, the creature relied entirely on these sensory roots to perceive its environment and locate potential prey. Its digestive system was also very complex, as its throat was able to differentiate between different prey items, weighing off how big and strong the prey was. Based on that assessment, it would then sort its prey into different stomachs. As the Sarlac continued to feed and fill up its stomachs, it at times ran out of space and was not able to take on more prey in its stomach. This was owed to its rather slow digestive system, which took a millennia to digest any prey. In case it was too full, it would at times integrate parts of a prey item's body into its own anatomy to physically expand its stomach capacity or keep some prey in secondary stomachs. The prey would also purposefully be left alive, and the stomach walls had tentacles as well that would fix them to the walls and prevent them from escaping. These tentacles would provide the prey with enough sustenance to keep them alive in order to keep digesting them, but also inject neurotoxins into them to render them immobile so they couldn't defend themselves. Now we know why Boba suffered so badly in there. Also makes me kinda sad how the robot chicken version of Boba and the Weequay just sitting in there talking isn't too realistic, but I digress. Sarlaccs could be found across the galaxy. The most prominent one was obviously the one on Tatooine in the Great Pit of Carkoon, whom Jabba wanted to feed the gang to. There was also one on Felucia when Starkiller faced off against Shaak Ti, where Shaak Ti used the Force to control the Sarlacc's tentacles to fight for her. In the 2017 Dice Battlefront, you can also see a huge Sarlacc pit on Felucia when you venture out to the lake. The Suma Verminoth was one of the biggest creatures in the entirety of Star Wars. It reached an enormous size of almost 7.5 kilometers, which, mind you, is bigger than 4 Star Destroyers. It appeared in Solo, a Star Wars story, when Han was forced to escape Kessel and make the Kessel Run. The Suma Verminoth seen there was living right inside the Akadis Maelstrom, right beside the Maw Cluster. It had come to this place centuries ago and fed off of prey that came by. What exactly that prey was, though, is unknown. The Suma Verminoth had multiple eyes and huge tentacles that had suckers and were electrified. It could use these tentacles to catch their prey items. It was seen chasing the Falcon through the Maw Cluster until they ejected its escape pod. The Suma Verminoth then chased the pod into the gravity pull, resulting in one of the most brutal deaths of any creature, as you can literally see its skin being torn apart and its flesh ripped from the skeleton by the black hole. What a sad end to a creature. The Krayt Dragon is probably the most popular creature in Star Wars. It was a reptilian creature native to Tatooine, everyone's favorite desert planet. However, Krayt Dragon was actually a term that referred to several different types of dragons, being the Greater Krayt Dragon and the smaller Canyon Krayt Dragons. The Greater Krayt, called a Leviathan Krayt, was the one we see in The Mandalorian. It had 16 feet, which was necessary to support its massive size, as it could grow up to 184 meters in length or more. To add to that, it could spit a type of highly corrosive acid from its stomach, which dissolves organic tissue and wood quite quickly. It had a thorny head, and as was common for Greater Krayt Dragons, moved under the sand and emerged to attack any prey item. The Banthas were an especially favored food source for them. They lived in massive caves that they'd hollow out, but the one in The Mandalorian actually ate a Sarlacc's pit to inhabit it later. The Greater Krayt being the only creature to even attempt eating a Sarlacc. There were different variations of the Greater Krayt, some only having 10 legs and looking a bit differently than the depiction in The Mandalorian. The skeleton that C-3PO walks past in A New Hope is also a juvenile Greater Krayt. The Canyon Krayt, on the other hand, is the one we can see in the Knights of the Old Republic, when Revan is searching for the star map on Tatooine. It only had 4 legs and reached a size of around 30 meters. It would often inhabit rocky caves and could be found in the canyons of Tatooine, just like its name suggests. It would hunt womp rats, dewbacks, and of course, banthas as well. It had different colors, with a rare version having a red coloring to it. This red version also looked quite different from the regular Canyon Krayt, as it had this Spinosaurus-esque fin on top of itself and a horned head like a Triceratops. Due to the size of the Krayt Dragons, it gave them a somewhat symbolic meaning on Tatooine. The Tuskens came up with all sorts of ways to live alongside these predators. If one were to often attack their village, they'd feed it with banthas in hopes that it would be less likely to leave its cave. Hunting a Krayt Dragon was also parts of initiation rituals for the Tuskens, although they'd usually go after the Canyon Krayts, as the Greater Krayts were far too strong for any individual Tusken to take down. Krayt Dragons had a weak spot in its head, and a well-placed shot could go right to their brain and kill them instantly. In its intestines, it would also produce a rare pearl known as the Krayt Dragon Pearl. When traveling under the sand, it would often consume wood and rocks, which at times would grind together and create these valuable pearls. As these pearls were very sought after, some groups would specifically hunt the Krayt Dragons in hopes of getting to the pearls in its stomach. Also, their meat was said to be rather delicious, and there's an exquisite recipe on how to cook their meat properly. As a fun fact to end the Krayt Dragon, the lightsaber form 5, Gem So, was also named after the Krayt Dragon, as Jedi would refer to it as the Way of the Krayt Dragon. The Krayt Dragon, or more precisely the Canyon Krayt Dragon, was also a unit you could deploy in Star Wars Commander, although it's not even close to how cool the Rancor is. There's always a bigger fish. Yep, that famous quote from Qui-Gon in Episode 1 referred to the Sando Aqua Monster, and they were in fact the biggest fish in the oceans of Naboo. These guys could grow up to 200 meters, which meant they'd rival the Leviathan Krayt Dragon in size and made them the apex predator of the Naboo seas. They had 2 powerful legs that they used to swim and 2 arms that they used to catch prey with. Now, if you were thinking it didn't really look like an aquatic animal, but rather like some sort of mammal with mutations to its tail, well, I've got some good news for you. You are right. They are in fact mammals. Although they live their entire lives in the water, though, similar to whales, due to their size, they'd only attack big prey like the OPC Killer and the Colo Clawfishes, and usually were ambush predators, laying low and waiting for prey to swim by before attacking them. They were, however, very rare, and to some Gungans and citizens of Naboo, they were even a myth, as they'd never really encountered them in the wild. After the There's Always a Bigger Fish line, Qui-Gon and the gang in the Gungan sub encountered the Colo Clawfish. It grew up to 40 meters in length and had a flat eel-like body. With these 40 meters, it was also a bigger fish than the sad little OPC Killer, who just ain't the big fish around in the seas of Naboo, as it only comes in at 20 meters. So I guess Qui-Gon was right after all. They had a unique screeching ability that could disorient its prey so they could easily eat it, and they'd frequently hunt young OPC Killer. However, as they'd usually swallow their prey, some OPC Killer have been seen eating their way through the organs of the Colo Clawfish to escape from it. Also, just like the OPC Killer, the one we see in Episode 1 sadly fell prey to the Sando Aqua Monster. Guess the real hero of the Star Wars saga is in fact the Sando Aqua Monster by saving Jar Jar, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan. Who knows what would have happened if they'd been eaten down there? Would certainly make a great what-if storyline. Staying in Naboo's water, here's the smallest of the 3 fish, but still. The OPC Killer was the 3rd largest fish in the ocean of Naboo, coming in at 20 meters. It had both features of a lobster and a fish, having hind legs similar to a lobster and an outer shell like a crustacean, but also fins and a fish-like face. It was well adapted for hunting underwater and often hid in caverns waiting for prey to come by before quickly following them and attacking them. It had a sticky tongue that it could extend to catch prey once in range and pull towards its mouth. It also had 2 glowing antennas, which it used to lure prey toward it, similar to how an anglerfish would do, as the OPC Killer was mostly in depths where there was almost no sunlight present. The Zillow Beast was a reptile native to Malastare. It grew to almost 100 meters in height and was the biggest predator on Malastare. However, due to that, the Dugs started to hunt them and eventually they went extinct. It wasn't until the Clone Wars, when one such beast resurfaced during a battle, when it was awoken by the Republic's electro-proton bomb. It had a rather funny look, with 3 arms and 2 legs, the 3rd arm most notably growing from its back. Also, it had a huge whip-like tail with 8 spikes. Most notably, they had a protective armor that encased it from head to tail. This armor was incredibly strong and one of the most durable materials in the entire galaxy. Blaster shots, bombs, and even lightsabers couldn't even scratch its surface. Their only real weakness were the gaps in its armor, as these could be penetrated. The Republic used their RX-200 Falcon tanks to stun it through these gaps and immobilize it. The Dugs themselves used the Malastare fuel fumes to kill the Zillow Beast, as it was poisonous to the beast. That was how they eventually went extinct. Due to the beast's durable armor, Palpatine wanted it to be cloned, and the beast from Malastare was taken to Coruscant for experimentation. On Mount Tantus during the Bad Batch episodes, a cloned Zillow Beast can be seen, which still seems to be a juvenile. It notably didn't have the 3rd arm yet, which suggests the arm doesn't grow fully until it reaches adulthood. What also made it distinct was that it seemed rather intelligent, being able to recognize Palpatine as the one responsible for its suffering during the Zillow Beast arc in the Clone Wars. However, how far their intelligence goes exactly is unknown. But still, the Zillow Beast is certainly one of the most popular creatures to come out of the Clone Wars series, hence why it reappeared in the Bad Batch again. These space whales, or purrgils, were massive whales that could fly, lived in space, and could most notably travel through hyperspace. They came in different sizes, shapes, and colors, with most of them being around 30 meters in length. Their design was very reminiscent and inspired by a real-life sperm whale, with added tentacles, that is. There were also bigger variants called the Purrgil Ultra, and it could do a supersonic kick and flip across the sky. Okay, that was a joke, but they are the ones who can be seen taking Thrawn's Star Destroyer into hyperspace, and judging from their size next to the Star Destroyer, they were likely around 800 meters long, which makes them one of the biggest beings in the galaxy. Design-wise, there were also different variants, with some sporting teeth while other had baleens. Purrgils usually lived in groups or pods of several dozen individuals, and could often be found close to Clozon 36 gas pockets. This gas was a necessity for them to breathe, and could be metabolized into hyperspace fuel to allow them to jump to hyperspace. There's a rumor that they were connected to the Force in some ways, which is why they were able to follow the hyperspace routes without ramming into any planets and such. They were one of the only beings in the galaxy that even discovered an extragalactic hyperspace lane to Peridea, which is seen in the Ahsoka show. On Peridea, the space whales would then go to die. Their ability to hyperspace travel is said to have been the inspiration for early sentient species to try and find their own way of traveling through hyperspace. These settlers would also follow the Purrgils to find the different hyperspace lanes and then properly map them out. However, over millennia, the Purrgil became more of a pest than something that the galaxy admired. This was owed to them often ramming into ships which were close to their hyperlane paths, or ships crashing into them during hyperspace travel itself. Due to that, most ships would immediately open fire to shoo them away if they saw them. Despite this, they were very intelligent creatures and also seemed to be incredibly powerful, as seen in the Star Wars Rebels finale, where they'd help Ezra take out the entire Star Destroyer of Grand Admiral Thrawn into a different galaxy. For some reason, they seemed rather happy to give random people rides through hyperspace, as Ahsoka did the same in her show as well, having her T6 shuttle be swallowed by one of the whales and conveniently taking her to Peridea instead of some random place like Sulost or whatever. The Gorax were a Bigfoot-looking species that inhabited the first moon of Endor. They were in fact the arch-nemesis of the local Ewoks, as they'd find themselves attacking the Ewok villages at times. The Gorax had humanoid features and were covered in fur from head to toe. They could reach a whopping 30 meters in height, and could thus easily reach the Ewok villages in the trees and swat them down like an annoying beehive. They were mostly found in mountainous terrain of Endor, though, and didn't frequently venture into the forest, but were incredibly strong, as they could easily unroot trees and would even use them as weapons. They had incredible hearing capabilities, but weak eyesight. It's also unclear how intelligent they really were. Similar to the Ewoks, they seemed sentient, however had less of an architectural vibe to them, as the Ewoks could literally build treehouses and little cloths to clothe themselves in. Meanwhile, the most the Gorax could come up with was taking some skulls and wrapping them around his body. Why he did that is also unknown. As a fun fact though, all the Ewoks traps we see them use against the AT-ST and the Empire were in fact to combat the Gorax in case of an attack, and repurposed to fight the Empire. Maybe that'll be an argument against all the Ewok haters, considering they'd literally fight these 30-meter giants that came to eat them alive. Torrenitechs were dark-side creatures that fed solely off the blood of Force-sensitive individuals. They were created through Sith alchemy by mutating the Rancors and resembled the Rancors from their body stature, although they were smaller at only 3 meters in height. What further differentiated them was that they had several spines running across their body, massive claws for hands, and 2 massive tusks around its mouth. Furthermore, their claws and tusks were highly venomous. The ancient Sith used these creatures in battle against the Jedi and were bred for the sole purpose of hunting the Jedi. The beasts were so steeped in the dark side that they were immune to most Force attacks against them, thus a Jedi had to rely solely on their lightsaber skills to try and combat these beasts. They had a very high kill rate on Jedi and were dubbed Jedi Killers by the Sith. Exar Kun used several Torrenitechs to destroy different Jedi outposts. After the Sith Wars ended, the Jedi went through the galaxy to hunt and kill all Torrenitechs, succeeding mostly, except for a few exceptions. By the time of the Jedi Civil War, which was the era of Darth Revan, only a few individuals were left. You can find one on Kashyyyk, close to the star map, where it felt the draw of the dark side. There were also Torrenitechs present on Korriban, Dromund Kaas, Tatooine, Yavin 4, and Onderon. They actually shouldn't really be on this list, as there are other creatures that are bigger than them, But I just wanted to talk about the Torrenitech, as I always quite like their concept to be attracted to Force sensitives. Also, I just always liked their design ever since playing the Knights of the Old Republic and encountering them there several times. Count Dooku also mentions Yoda and himself facing one on Kashyyyk during the flashback scene with Yoda.
I was telling them the tale of when you faced the giant Torrenitech on Kashyyyk. What a terrible...
The Camaradin Sea Dragon was a huge turtle-like creature native to the oceans of Kamino. They had 6 legs and were carnivorous, as their mouths sported sharp teeth for them to catch prey with. They would measure up to 120 meters in length. They'd often be seen around Tipoca City searching for smaller sea creatures as prey. Although it was considered the biggest creature in the oceans of Kamino, it did have an outer shell to protect it from any potential attacks. Although it's unknown what exactly would even attack a Camaradin Sea Dragon, as they were on the very top of the food chain. One such beast can be seen in the Bad Batch when Clone Force 99 attempts to escape the bombardment of Tipoca City. The Veratheian appeared briefly during the Bad Batch episode where Ventress returned back to the canon, having successfully survived Order 66. It was a huge octopus-looking thing that lived in the ocean of Pabu, although it only had 3 tentacles, unlike the octopus which had 8. It could grow up to 30 meters in length and 12 meters in height. It had a bony beak which was on top of its eyes and also a harder outer shell similar to a turtle to protect its head. Also, it could radiate in bioluminescent lights. I think the main highlight of this thing is just this cool pic with Ventress beast taming it in a How to Train Your Dragon style. And that's it for this video. Please like and subscribe.